we started with money. I guess I'll try to finish with money. All of it comes down to spending less than you earn, no matter how much you're earning. Because the thing that enabled me to go out on my own is that I had the money saved up to live for a year, even if I wasn't successful. And so it turned out that first year, yes, it was super tough. I made just enough to kind of pay my bills, but I had reserves from when I was working. And, that started for me at the age of 15, essentially saving money all the way through. And so if you want to be able to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to take the risk. And in order to be able to take the risk, you have to be able to have the money to do that.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Josh Lewis, who shares how he started and grew his business. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Darren Hardy. Your biggest challenge isn't that you've intentionally been making bad choices. Your biggest challenge is that you've been sleepwalking through your choices. I'm always shocked at how many people sleepwalk through life. As you listen to Josh's story, you will notice he is intentional in trying new things and thinking about what he wants from life. It's about thinking about what you want and also what you don't want. As you listen to Josh's story, you will hear these themes come up. Happy holidays. I'm relaxing these last 2 weeks of the year and planning out next year. It's a time of turning off a lot of routine life and catching up with unfinished business. I'm also getting ready for 2021 and planning out my year. This next quarter is focused on financial learning and making decisions around how to invest in unpredictable markets. One of the areas I want to focus on is options trading. I'm mapping out the first 12 weeks of 2021 as part of my 12-week year. And we're going to have a bonus episode this week on Friday, so check that out. You should also think about what you want for next year and map out your quarterly progress goals. Because I've picked a theme for the quarter, anything that's not part of the theme tends to get put on hold. It's a lot easier for me to say yes and no. Today's guest is Josh, a real estate developer, investor, and past roofing company owner. Having sold a roofing company back in January this year, he currently spends his time building out a training and business platform to help other driven individuals start roofing companies. Outside of work, he enjoys hiking and biking, having climbed Mt Kilimanjaro in 2018. and he's always up for an adventure and talking about business ideas. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Josh Lewis. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. Today's a little different because we're at PodMax. Usually I do a ton of research on the guest, but this episode, we just literally met a few minutes ago, and we're going to get a chance to dig into your story. So we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Sure. Great question. Like probably most Americans, my parents tended to not talk a lot about money in general. And so I don't feel like there were a lot of lessons or teachings that pertained to anything other than, kind of the basics of there's how you balance a checkbook, which, I guess is a good starting place. But there were never any further discussions. And I think the main reason for that is that my parents simply didn't know themselves. That's something they didn't learn from their parents and didn't pick up any kind of book or teaching material along the way. And as a result, it's kind of a symptom of you can't teach what you don't know. And I think that's what kind of led to where I got. So when I was in college, I was studying to be an engineer and realized that I didn't think I was ever going to be the best engineer. I wasn't the best at math. I wasn't the best at all the calculations. And it kind of set me on this path of, my gosh, if I'm not going to be an engineer, I might as well finish my degree because I've come this far. But what am I going to do with my life? And so from that, it put me on a journey of just reading. And so I picked up and read just about everything I could get my hands on, from biographies of past presidents, biographies of successful business people. Of course, that led me into reading business books and, some of the classics like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then the one that changed my life, as probably a lot of people that are in real estate investing, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That kind of set me on a path toward recognizing, I guess that was my first financial education.
And that's impressive that you actually, at a young age, took the time to think about what is it that I really want to do, and then actually took the time to go read all of these books to learn how do people succeed and how can I start applying it. Were there certain biographies that you read that inspired you or that taught you certain lessons?
Yeah, one that particularly sticks out in my mind is when I read about George Washington. Obviously, if you're living in America, you know who George Washington is. But a lot of people don't know much deeper than that he was the president. And before that, he was the general of the army. But earlier in his life, he grew up as one of the youngest sons of a not super wealthy man. And so learning how he became who he was from where he started is just an impressive story, start to finish. I mean, there were a lot of windfalls, I guess you could say, that went his way. But at the same time, he took every opportunity he could to learn something new, to better himself, and I guess to be the best version of himself that he could be.
Opportunity is always knocking, but we have to be prepared to open the door and answer the call. And from what you're saying, it sounds like he prepared himself to answer that call and was ready when the opportunity happened. Too often, I think opportunity comes around and we get scared and we refuse to step up because you're like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And that's part of what separates some from others is building the strong foundation so that they can do that. So you got out of college, you read all these books, you decided, I guess, on real estate. What happened next?
Sure. So I actually, at 23 years old, I was working for, they're kind of an engineering firm, but more construction based. And just kind of felt like the growth wasn't there. I wasn't learning enough fast enough to satisfy my, I guess, maybe the wrong word, but what I'm going to use is ambitions. And so it was kind of this, I guess I wanted to speed up. And my only way of figuring out how to do that was to jump out on my own, which at 23 years old, I thought I could be a developer. So I named the company JGL Development, and I had no experience, no money, no network, none of the things that it required to actually to be a developer. But I guess it was that dream, and so I spent that whole first year just kind of spinning my wheels and didn't have much success at all, other than found out what I didn't want to do. So I was renovating people's kitchens, renovating people's bathrooms, just kind of taking on every project that I could get my hands on. And ultimately, I maybe made 30 or 40,000 bucks on the year, but I worked, 80-hour weeks all year round. And so at the end of the year, there was just kind of this moment of like, geez, I obviously can't be a developer. I don't know enough. I obviously can't chase real estate and construction at the same time, because I got my real estate license, and that's a whole nother thing. But one of the key things that I read that year actually was The One Thing by Gary Keller. And I think a lot of people have gotten their hands on this book, but it is a focusing book, which I think we all need. We just need sometimes to focus, because when you're young, of course, there's all of these could be's and maybes. And then I think the thing people try to do is chase all of them at once, when really, if you just chase one of those and break it down even further, so I whittled it down into construction. Okay, I'm not going to be a developer. I'm not going to be a real estate agent. I'm going to be a contractor. And then from that, I whittled it down even further to I'm going to be a roofing contractor, which doesn't sound very exciting. I know roofing in general doesn't really have a great rep in the world of construction. But what I learned was how to manage people, how to write contracts, how to set expectations, and really was able to take that and grow it.
That's impressive. So I'm just going to tease out a couple things that you said, because I find it's very important to know what you don't want, because it makes it easier to decide what you do want. And a lot of times, just that process of crossing things off is super important. And I have also read The One Thing by Gary Keller, and he asks the question, and I'm not going to get it perfectly right, but what is the one thing you can do that essentially makes everything else easier? And it's based on the principle that a domino can knock down a domino that's 50% bigger than that. And that domino can knock down a domino that's 50% bigger than that. Now, this comes back to what we've always talked about on the show. The underlying principle is compounding, right? Compounding works in both ways. And so what Gary's telling you to do is to think, how do you start that compound going so that you knock down one domino, that 30 dominoes down the road is this massive success, whatever it is that you're going to achieve. And then you just focus on knocking down your one domino. So it's a lot of thinking time, which I know that drives people crazy, but you have to stop and think instead of just taking all the wrong actions. So like you talked about in your first year, you were running around doing everything, but getting nowhere. Instead of taking the time, once you refine it, you think it through, you built a niche, you focused on one area, and then you use that to build all the skills that you needed to be successful. And I think that's a big part of it. And too often we miss that whole step of really thinking through things and exploring so that we can be super, super focused.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Rocky. I mean, it comes down to when you start a business, generally your first struggle is, where is the business coming from? Who can I sell something to? And then your next struggle becomes, okay, how do I sell it? What now? So it's marketing, and then it's sales, and then it's great. Now that it's sold, how do I get that thing done? And so the One Thing really helped me to focus on, let's join some business networking groups. I'm going to throw a shout out to Business Networking International. It's a great organization that enables people to meet other business owners that can most of the time refer you business. And if nothing else, it helps you become a better networker, which is important in life in the long run.
B&I, yeah, they do some impressive things. I've talked to some people who've been part of it, and even people who've owned a couple of those franchises. And they do have some high-level speakers, and they are great for networking. So you've got the roofing business. You're relatively young. What happened next?
Sure. So we kind of doubled in revenue year over year. So we started in 2014, doubled into 2015, 16, 17, 18. And then it wasn't exact doubling, but pretty darn close. And so essentially when I sold, actually back in January, the business had become something that was valuable. It was an asset that could be transferred to someone else. And the person that bought it, they're doing fantastic. Obviously, it worked. It was a win-win in all situations, for all parties, I guess you could say. And that's cool to see a legacy that I built go on. But also it set me on a different path, which was to be able to start something new.
And so what is the new thing that you have started this year?
Sure. So I took all of my knowledge that I gained from starting, running, growing, operating that roofing company. And what I'm creating is basically a package to teach other people how to start and grow specifically roofing companies. And essentially this package is aimed at someone who has a lot of drive, has that ambition, but doesn't quite know where to put it. I think there are lots of people out there that would take an entrepreneurial step if they felt like they had the backing to be able to do it. And so this system is designed to help people do that. It's almost like a franchise, sort of like a business in a box, I guess you could say. So it's all of the software, all of the training programs, and the support that you need. But it's significantly less expensive than most franchises. And by that, I mean probably 75% cheaper than your average franchise starting fee.
And so for many people, when you want to start a business or when you want to do something, having a system to follow that's step by step and having processes in place make it so much easier. That was one of the reasons that I joined Profit First. I was like, I can build this whole thing myself. I know all the principles, but by going with Profit First, it made it easier. They had everything laid out for me, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking. I could immediately start implementing. Plus, you get a support system, right? It's lonely being an entrepreneur on your own, and having a support system in your specific specialty so that when you have these kind of weird questions or these one-offs, you can get answers immediately is a big part of that. So what are some of the underlying principles of your system that you've created?
Yeah, so I think the defining principle is really just affordability. So making it accessible to someone who, maybe hasn't had some amazing career in finance or something before starting a business, as you often see in franchises. So it's essentially I guess the goal is the everyman's, business package. And I think what people don't realize is that there's a lot of money in the trade businesses, simply because there's a lot of people in the trades that I guess the best way to describe it is that they're not very sophisticated. They're not running the latest, greatest softwares. They're kind of a guy that was a roofer and decided to start his own roofing company instead of someone who's focused on being a great business owner and offering amazing customer service. And so this whole platform is to teach people, kind of those defining principles of, hey, be a great, offer something great and then ask a reasonable price for it. And that's going to take you a whole lot further than either trying to gouge on one end or trying to oversell on the other end. Because, there's a lot of people in the roofing industry that are kind of that high pressure sales tactic type environment where they're asking for the husband and the wife to be there at the same time. And then they work on one or the other's fears in order to get a sale. And they're sometimes triple or, double or triple what we're charging, which is what I would call a reasonable rate, something that people can afford.
It's funny because I have real estate and I've done a ton of roofs, and it's amazing how much price differentials will come in.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, the shingles are exactly the same, right? The underlayment is relatively close. There is a certain amount of quality in how you actually lay the shingles and you seal up the edges, but there is 100% price variability between companies, if not greater. And the price you pay is not reflective of the quality.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. A lot of it is just sales tactics and techniques, and then kind of what I said, just overcharging, just pure out and out overcharging.
And I think people need to overcome their fears, number one, because that's what they're playing against are the fears. And then two is to realize that the price you're charged doesn't necessarily relate to quality or to outcomes. And that's a shame. I do know that trades as a country should be starting to talk more about this. But for a lot of people, going into the trades is a very lucrative career. I know people who are master mechanics making six figures doing what they love. And they enjoy fixing cars and they make a lot of money. Electricians, plumbers, we all joke about how much they make. But yet none of us want to go into that. And at the same time, you did make an important distinction, which is, there is the working of the business, but then there is the business owner who has to think very differently than the tradesperson.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the cool things, though, about being in the trades is that it gives you also the ability to get into real estate, which is where you really can build your wealth. Because if you know how to do a particular part of the trade, more often than not, you start making friends in other trades. Now you can create your little posse to go in, and if you're picking up a house and you need to reno it, and you've got all your tradespeople essentially at wholesale because they're all working on their own property, you have the ability to build an empire. And it works. And unfortunately, a lot of people all try to chase dreams without, it goes back to what we started with, right? You got to think about your outcomes and how do you get there?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, to play on what you're saying, a lot of people downplay the importance of the trades in general. And that's why I don't feel like there's not an overwhelming amount of talent that's chasing those businesses. And that's simply why I think they're so lucrative right now. There's just a huge supply and demand issue. And that's what it boils down to. One thing I do want to touch on before you kind of gave me a great segue into real estate. But one thing I do want to touch on before all this is that one other mission, a part of this system that we're creating is the give back. And so what we're doing with that is that we're going to operate as efficiently as we can, provide as much value as we can to our licensees. And at the end of all of that, I am giving 50% of our profits to nonprofit organizations that help people learn anything, but specifically trades, fiscal responsibility, kind of, I hate to say it, but Dave Ramsey type, save, don't spend money on credit cards, but just training people how to grow, earn, and be better at finances.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And so here's the reality. There is almost an impossibility of a trade job being shipped to China, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. If you need plumbing done, it's got to be done in the U.S. So I've been doing plumbing my whole life, and I remember how hard plumbing used to be compared to how easy it is today. And I don't think people realize that.
Yeah, you used to have that like 1,000-degree torch and you're like melting the pipes together. And now it's like clamps.
Clamps. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. And the cool thing with clamps is it's easy to run them up walls. So if you're doing a reconstruction project, it is so much easier to do that. And I remember how hard it was. This is before flexible piping even came out, right? You had to get everything perfect and bend it just right or it wouldn't work. And now the stuff that has come out is just so simple. But the bottom line is
color coordinated. It's like blue for the cold and red for the hot. I mean, this couldn't have made it any easier nowadays.
They couldn't have made it any easier. But there is tremendous amount of money to be made there, and you are guaranteed job security. And during COVID, actually, prices have just skyrocketed. Construction is overwhelmed. The price of materials has skyrocketed. And there is just a backlog because it's just what happened during this recession. Well, we're not really in a recession, but
again, supply and demand, there's not a lot of people that know how to do it. And I feel like I do need to throw in one asterisk that yes, they have made the modern materials easier, but when you're connecting to the older, scenarios and setups, you do truly need a skilled tradesman that 100% knows what he's doing. I don't want there to be any listeners out there that are tradesmen and going, hey, it's not that easy. Come on. It's definitely hard work. So I got to throw that out there.
Oh, no, it is. And when you have the skill set of doing it, you can do it 10 times faster. Like if I have to go do that, I've got to go watch a YouTube, figure it out. I do it wrong 3 times. I go to Home Depot 7 times. It's a lot different when you have a person who does it all the time, who knows how to do it. They can crank through it, and it's much, much easier. So that is very, very true. Was there something in real estate that you wanted to touch on that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to kind of what I'm doing in tandem. So throughout owning the roofing company, I was investing in real estate, and I was buying just kind of anything I could get my hands on. And what that led me to was purchasing a bunch of condos that were in a college town where my parents lived. And the difficulty became, I ended up with 15 of these things. And the difficulty became when my parents wanted to move out of the area, I didn't live there anymore either. So next thing you know, I don't have boots on the ground. And the other thing that I found out is that they were 4-bedroom, 4 baths. And, we were kind of renting by the bedroom. That's what made them so profitable. And when I went to go find, do some more research, I realized that the city ordinance would only allow 3 unrelated people to live in 1 unit. That was kind of the law. And so when I wanted to get a property manager, they all basically said, well, we can only rent 3 of the bedrooms unless we find someone who's a sibling or a cousin or, some kind of family relation. And obviously the chances start to go way down. And so that led to a restructuring of the portfolio, and exactly what you were saying, where being in the trades, you kind of develop this posse of other people that know how to do different aspects. I'm now building rental properties for myself. So basically ground up construction on duplexes that, frankly, blow any kind of metric out of the water when it comes to return on investment. But it's simply because instead of buying something that someone made, we're building the equity into it.
And so I don't know that people realize this. The money in real estate is always made on the purchase. That is where you make your money, not on the sale, not on the appreciation. You make your money by purchasing right, which gives you tremendous cash flow or opportunity to flip or whatever it is that you are doing.
Or just holding it forever.
Or just holding it forever. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I will tell you, at some point you get tired. You're like, we're done. We're selling out and we're going to go do whatever. But that's for you. That's decades upon decades away from that. So there is one thing I did want to touch on, because I always don't understand this with people, just because I don't understand it because it's not me, right? You went and climbed a mountain. Like, you went and climbed Kilimanjaro. Like, what? I don't understand why people love to climb mountains and what motivates them to go do something like that.
I think that it's the challenge. It's kind of this, if you're building a business, let's say it's all this theoretical goals and accomplishments, right? You kind of set your revenue metric. You're like, hey, I want to do $1 million in revenue. And then when you hit it, it's like, awesome, we did that million, but there's not this physical representation versus when you're climbing a mountain. I mean, you see the peak when you're starting, or sometimes you don't because it's in the clouds. But, you kind of see that destination and you're thinking to yourself, wow, in a couple of days, I'm either going to be there or I'm going to fail. You're kind of mentally preparing yourself. And then you start the trek, you prepare, you get together all of your supplies and your guide and all of those things. And then you start on the hike. And it's like, once you're started, you can't turn back or else you truly have failed. Versus business, it's like, well, you could miss my $1 million revenue mark this year, but hey, we learned something new and we'll aim again next year. So I guess it's more of this defined goal, and then you either win or you don't. You summit or you don't, type thing. And so luckily in our case, my now wife and I, we climbed it. We did a longer route so that we could acclimatize on the way up. And so 7 days in, at 12 o'clock at night, we were 15,800-ish feet at the camp, kind of headed up to the summit. And so we woke up and started on that climb. And I tell you what, it was a magical experience being able to have the stars overhead, the freezing temperatures, kind of our water froze within the first hour of the 6-hour trek. But every step you're taking, you're getting that much closer to the summit. And it's this mental battle with yourself going, am I stopping or am I going to keep going? Because you're breathing as hard as you possibly can. And you're kind of at that limit of, is there oxygen? Is there oxygen enough to actually keep my body running? And then the Kilimanjaro in particular, it's 19,000 and some odd change feet. And just a really awesome experience to be able to go and face the challenge, put myself on the line, I guess you could say. And ultimately we ended up being successful. So
everyone talks about the climb up. What's the climb back like?
That's a great question. On Kilimanjaro, there's like this backside of the mountain that's basically like rock screed. So when you're coming up, you're switchbacking all the way up. You're up, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, slowly climbing. But on the backside, it's like kind of this just large hill with rock screed, and you use almost like ski poles, but walking poles that are a little stiffer. And you basically like ski down the mountain almost. You kind of step and the rocks slide underneath you and you step, but it's a very controlled kind of going down. And so, it took 7 days to go up, but only 1 day to go down.
Wow. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I was just interesting. You're relatively young and you've had tremendous success throughout different parts of your life. What do you think are some of the underlying principles or reasons that you've been so successful?
Sure. I got asked this question a couple years back, and it was a post from a friend of mine that, we went to college together. We graduated at the same time, and he went the route of a government position, and it was something in the technology sector. So he was doing fairly well. But there was still this feeling of, I guess, sort of being left behind. And so we were sitting around having a beer, and he just asked me the question, hey, Josh, what do you think is the number one thing that made you successful in doing this? And it took me a second to really think about it. But the answer I came back with was just doing what I said I was going to do. And I know that sounds extremely simple, but it comes down to everything from showing up on time to telling someone that you're going to get them an estimate, getting it to them. With your employees, telling them that you're going to take care of them, but then actually doing it, getting them those benefits. Or, for example, one of my secretaries a year ago had, her son was about to start soccer, and I just reached out and was like, hey, could I buy his soccer equipment? And it wasn't that expensive, a couple $100 or whatever to buy him some new cleats and whatever. But that was something that just touched her heart deeply, and you could tell by her reaction. And then, her son called me the next week and was like, thank you so much. This is amazing. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to use my old gear, and just overwhelmed. And so it's just that sort of making a commitment and sticking to it.
Life is simple, but doing simple is hard. Right? And it sounds like that. And a lot of us take a safe path, and because we're told to do that. And I think what people are learning more and more is that the safe path is not always the right way to go. And it's not usually as safe as you think it is. And as we go into, I don't know what the economy is going to do going forward, but I am hearing of a lot more of uncertainty in jobs, in opportunities, and cutbacks, so forth. So going out on your own, or at least having the ability to do that, even if you start on the side, creates a whole nother level of security. And so does real estate. It creates another level of security. And the more of those types of things you can do, the better it is to do that. I was just speaking at a university recently on entrepreneurship. And what I told the kids was, spend your 20s figuring out who you are and what you're good at. Some people are faster at doing that than others. It seems like you were super fast at figuring that out, but you also spent a lot of time reading and learning. And so I think we push too much to make a decision too early. And it's better to spend a little bit of time just going out and exploring the world so that you can figure out your yeses and your nos, and what do you really want and what are you good at, and find that perfect fit. And it sounds like you've done a pretty good job of that.
I do have one thing to add to that. You mentioned, being able to go out as an entrepreneur. And what I'll say is all of it, I guess we started with money. I guess I'll try to finish with money. All of it comes down to spending less than you earn, no matter how much you're earning. Because the thing that enabled me to go out on my own is that I had the money saved up to live for a year, even if I wasn't successful. And so it turned out that first year, yes, it was super tough. I made just enough to kind of pay my bills, but I had reserves from when I was working. And, that started for me at the age of 15, essentially saving money all the way through. And so if you want to be able to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to take the risk. And in order to be able to take the risk, you have to be able to have the money to do that.
And I tell most people, you should plan for 3 years to get a business profitable. It takes time. Don't expect to go out and make money overnight. And that's why doing it on the side is one way to do it, because then you're cash flowing from work. If not, save up your money so that you do have that runway of 2 to 3 years of income to be able to support you through the tough times. And that is very important.
Absolutely.
We've talked about
if you're spending, or if you're making $1 million a year, but you're spending $1,000,001, you are broke.
You are broke, but to the world, you look great, right? Everyone thinks they're doing phenomenal, but underneath the hood, when you look at what's going on, it's a financial disaster. And we've talked about that on many episodes. It's good to come back and just remind people of that simple principle. It doesn't matter how much you make. It matters how much you keep. And the more and more you can create that gap, the more and more you build wealth. The more and more you build wealth, the more and more you have freedom, to the point where you can come to a point in life where, I'm at the point in life where I don't have to ever earn another dollar. It's, I just do what I love now. And it takes time to get to that point. You can go as fast or as slow as you want. Enjoy the journey, but it's definitely wise to be focused on the underlying numbers. And most business owners are horrible at this. It's beyond comprehension. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
For me, I think it's the pursuit of balance, even though I think balance it's a constant, it's a myth. It's a constant, you have to chase it, I guess you could say. There's no way to have a 100% balanced day, in my opinion, because things come up. There's always something that's different, and you have to, push one way and push back the other, I guess you could say.
So when I started this podcast, we talked about having balance, and about halfway through, we figured out we had the wrong word and it screwed everyone up. And so now we talk about harmony, because with harmony, there are different parts of your life that are going to come to the front. There are parts that are going to go to the back. You've got to figure out to turn the dials to have harmony in your day, that you are excited about what you're doing. And that's much easier to achieve than balance, because, as you said, you will never be balanced, but you can find that perfect harmony, that song for your life.
I love it, Rocky. That's great info.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I think the number one thing for me there is just recognizing where you're at on the totem pole, I guess you could say. Launching and thinking that I was going to start a development company at 23 years old obviously wasn't feasible. And to people older than me, I'm sure they thought it sounded ridiculous. To me at the time, I thought it was genius, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a developer. Now here I am 8 years later nearly, and that's becoming a reality. But it's kind of like knowing where you're at so that you're not kind of touting a horn bigger than you actually wield, I guess you could say.
And that's wise advice. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And that's why it's a good idea to test your plans by going and finding people in that specific place and asking them, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Am I on track, or what am I missing? And so getting that sage advice is quite helpful.
Absolutely.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
This is going to sound really boring, but just read. Read. You exactly what we're tapping into here, where being able to sit down with someone is powerful, but I don't think there's any better way to grasp someone's meaning and the heart behind what they're saying than picking up a book and reading their written words. And that comes in the form of biographies, business books, etc. These are people that have been there, done this, they've proven the concepts, and they're kind of fundamental truths that will never go away, no matter what the economy is doing.
And that's very true. I try to read about 2 to 7 books a month, and it just varies based on time, but I'm still constantly learning and reading and finding. Now I'm trying to work more on implementing. If people would like to find you, connect, learn more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way to probably do that is my Instagram, and my handle on Instagram is JGLewis1. So that's JGLEWIS 1.
And I will put that in the show notes to make it easy for people to click and find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Rocky. This has been a great experience.
I always wondered what it was like coming back down off the peak of the mountain. I didn't realize it would be so quick. Did you hear the closing comments? When you spend less and build reserves, that allows you the ability to have success. It's the core principle that I use to build wealth. You do it both personally and in business. Also, the safe path is not always the right way to go. Too often we've been fooled to believe that a job is safe, when now more and more people get laid off for reasons that have nothing to do with them. It's that time of year to do your thinking about what you want out of life, how this year went, and what you want from next year. Remember, there's a Facebook page for Richer Soul. Check it out. I post articles there all the time, and we can have a conversation. I hope you have an enjoyable, restful holiday break. Thanks for listening.